I'm Shannon Moore, and this is Formation. Today on the podcast, we'll be talking with someone who finds spirituality in theater and television. Join us. Welcome to Formation, a weekly podcast from University Christian Church in Fort Worth, Texas, where each week I sit down with people and we talk about faith. I'm very excited about our guest today. It is Harry Parker.
Hello.
Hey, Harry. Thank you for being here today.
It's a pleasure.
You are a theater professor
I
at
am.
Texas Christian University. How long have you been doing that?
At TCU, this is my 22nd year, but I've been doing it about 40 years. I taught at a couple of places before I came to TCU.
Okay. Well, we're certainly glad that you came to TCU.
Well, I'm a TCU alum, so is my wife, so it was coming home for us.
Yeah, if anybody wonders if your wife is an alum, it doesn't take long.
No, it doesn't.
To find out.
Correct.
When you talk
Correct.
to her.
We're both loyal, but she's really loyal. Maybe that's because she doesn't work there. I don't know. Let's think about that.
Let's do.
Maybe. I don't know.
Maybe that might be another episode.
Yeah, another one.
Harry, I always like to start out by asking people just about their childhood and what faith looked like or didn't in your growing up. How was your faith formed as a child?
I grew up in Oklahoma City, and I was blessed to be in a very close, loving family. My sister used to say we won the parent lottery. We had two wonderful parents, both very sincere, committed believers long before we came around. And so there were the four of us, two kids, and we grew up in a Disciples of Christ church. We grew up at Crown Heights Christian Church in Oklahoma City, which is still there and still going. And I had a positive experience in church. As a kid, I had a positive experience with my parents talking with us about issues of faith, praying with us, and really kind of modeling for us what their Christian life was like by example. And they were in small groups. They frequently met at our home. They had great friends at the church. So this was the church where my mother had started going when she was a teenager, when her family had moved to Oklahoma City. And my parents had been married in this church, and eventually both my sister and I were baptized in this church. So it was our church. It was our family church. And then, Shannon, when I was maybe 8 or 9 years old, my parents, as I think back on this, I think the best way to say it is they got a little restless.
Okay.
And I remember my mom saying something like, they just felt like they weren't being very fed spiritually. And so we began going, not instead of, but in addition to, a non-denominational church, which, again, I didn't know any of these labels as a kid.
Correct.
Evangelical, maybe charismatic. There was a lot of raising holy hands. There was a lot of hallelujahs and amens. There was a lot of gospel singing. It was the antithesis of the high church, rather formal disciples worship that I was used to. Yeah, at Crown Heights Christian.
So would that be a back-to-back experience, or was one in the morning, one in the evening?
Yeah, we'd go. This evangelical or non-denom was called the Christian Center, and it met in an old airplane hangar. I don't know how they found it, but we'd go there on Sunday nights and usually on Wednesday nights, and then go to Crown Heights on Sunday mornings, and I can't remember exactly, but we went about twice a week to the Christian Center.
So for a 8-year-old, that's pretty formative
Sure.
years, who's accustomed to this orderly form of worship.
Yes.
Now suddenly you're finding yourself even the look of the place is very
Correct.
different. How did that?
The demographics of the congregants, very different.
Much younger?
Much more blue collar. Nobody had on a coat and tie. Everybody wore a coat and tie.
Everybody.
Right,
on
at
Sunday
the
morning.
Disciples Church, Sunday mornings. But no, they dressed like I dress now. So they were in jeans and relaxed and cowboy boots. And
Do you remember how you felt about that? Did you like it?
I grew to like it. I think at first I was just curious. I was never put off. And the preaching was far more Bible centered than the preaching from the Disciples Church. I used to hear my parents tease about the fact that scripture was read in the disciples service, and then our minister would preach and never quote the Bible, but a lot of Shakespeare and Thornton Wilder, which I actually loved. I thought that was great. So there were a lot of interesting secular texts being used for preaching at Crown Heights, but it was all the Bible at the Christian Center. Oh, you'll love this. There was also an older couple, I'm guessing now in my memory, they might have been in their 70s, two grand pianos kind of pushed in next to each other. This is Ferranti and Teicher. Remember them? Oh, you're too young. Yeah, there was that was two men that had a series of recordings in the 60s where they would do Liberace style piano with two pianos. Okay? Yeah, you look them up. You'll like them. I know your taste. But this was a married couple, and oh gosh, I hope I have their names right. It was Bert and Jesse, and I swear I think their last name was Miracle. Or they had adopted that name as performers. But they really rocked those two grand pianos with gospel songs. They would do improvisations. So what was not to like, right? It was lively. There was a lot of lifting holy hands. They used to do potluck picnics. And I remember going to many of those, and the food was good, and we'd bay out in the park. And so
did that color your experience on Sunday mornings? Did you not want to do that?
No, my parents were happy going to both, so I was happy going to both. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And did that continue for a long time?
I think it continued for 4 or 5 years. Perhaps my parents sort of cooled on the Christian Center experience. Look, they were never, ever going to leave their membership at the Disciples Church. Mm-hmm. They were committed. They were loyal. I don't think they had women elders back then, but I know my dad was a deacon and an elder. My mom taught adult Sunday school at Crown Heights Christian for decades. Invested. And I think what it did for me, as I look back on it now, was it taught me at an early age that there's more than one way to worship the same God. I never was confused and thought, is this God the same God as the one over here at this church? I always knew it was the same God. And it was kind of an early object lesson in, is this a word, ecumenicism? Being ecumenical, understanding that people who lift holy hands and clap and stomp are Christians, just like people who sit quietly and sing beautifully in 4-part harmony from the hymnal. You know?
Yeah.
So they were both good. I liked them both.
So what happened after, as you grew up, high school, college?
Yeah, high school I probably didn't pay much attention to my faith at all.
Okay.
You know, I remember going to Cairo, the junior high group. CYF, that was a little nerdy.
That's the high schoolers.
They weren't cool anymore. And I got really involved in high school. I had jobs. I worked at restaurants, you know.
And were you in theater and high school?
Absolutely. And that took a lot of time. You like this story. I started dating a Catholic girl. I didn't know anything about Catholicism, nothing, okay? And I remember that she came to church with us a couple of times, and then she invited me to go to Mass with her. And she liked to go to Mass at 5 o'clock or 5:30 on Saturday. So then if she wanted to go out and party on Saturday night, she didn't have to get up for church on Sunday morning. So that was a good deal. Yeah, it was a really good, we didn't have that system in the Disciple Church, you know. So I remember going to Mass with her, and it was a big parish. There were a lot of people there. And first couple of times I went with her, I would go up to the front and take communion. And we'd come back and sit down. And like the second or third time, she said, I don't think you're supposed to take communion at our church. And I got all huffy, and I said, you can take communion at our church? And she said, yeah, this is not your church. She's exactly right. And I said, nobody knows. There's a million people here. She said, oh, the priest knows. He's given me the evil eye. She said, you can go up there and fold your arms and get the blessing. I said, I'm not going to do communion light. No, I'm not doing that. I was offended that the communion was not open to me. I had never heard of such a thing.
Well, here's what a rule follower I am.
Yeah.
The last time I was worshiping in the Catholic Church, I was in New York City.
Uh-huh.
It was the closest church to
Sure.
where I was staying, so I got up and went, and I was sitting there, determined that at communion I was going to take communion, and then when it came time, I thought, he's going to know.
He's going to know.
And I didn't.
Well, look,
I was scared too.
I'm not telling you did the right thing or the wrong thing, but I want to confirm for you that he would have known. Because you would not have done it exactly right.
Uh-huh.
And he probably recognizes most of the people,
Uh-huh.
even if it was a big parish.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So,
All
yeah.
right. Well,
Yeah.
we're going to take a short break,
Great.
and then we will be right back to continue this conversation with Harry Parker.
My role with the Acolytes on Sunday morning, it starts during the week. I email the parents of the 4th, 5th, and 6th graders to get their children signed up so that they can actually participate in the traditional worship at 11:15. One of the significant things about working with them is seeing the face of the congregation when the acolytes really bring the light of Christ into the sanctuary and light the candles on the altar. And then once we've been to the table, once we've broken bread and we've heard an amazing message, we're to carry that light out into the community. And the acolytes are the very symbol that shows us that we're to take that message out, carrying the light of Christ into our community.
Well, we are back, continuing this conversation with Harry Parker. Harry, there's something I want to talk about. I know that we have something in common, which, well, we have a lot of
More
things
than one
in
thing,
common. We
yes.
have a lot of things in common. One of those things is classic television.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me a little bit about some of the stuff you watched and how it affected your sort of sense of morality?
Wow, morality.
Or
No,
your
no.
belief system? Or
Yeah. I grew up, I'm older than you, and I grew up in the 60s, and I watched a lot of reruns. So when I would come home from school, there was an hour or so when I would watch television, and I watched I Love Lucy. And these are, all the sitcoms were my favorites, right? And I watched Leave It to Beaver, and I watched Father Knows Best. And I really liked Father Knows Best. That was all kind of traditional roles and sweet and homey, and that was good. But when I would watch Leave It to Beaver, I can remember my mom coming in, and she would kind of pay attention to what I was watching. And after a while, she would say, I don't really like that show. And I said, what's the matter with this? It's great. And she said, every episode has the same plot. Beaver does something wrong. Larry Mondello talks him into doing something wrong. Let's throw rocks through these windows. And then Beaver goes home and lies about it until the last, couple of minutes when he finally confesses. And Dad says, oh, it's okay. And she said, look, I understand everybody misbehaves, but she said, he always lies about it. There's a lot of lying in that show. I don't like that show. So I thought, I remember her comment making me think a little bit more about how the plots were developed in these shows. And looking for, her comment that every episode was the same was perhaps a little bit of an exaggeration, but not a lot, because, popular television is formulaic. And so I'm figuring this out. I'm thinking, oh, I see. Every episode of Bewitched has these components, just about every episode, right? Mm-hmm. There's 3 or 4 things you can count on in an episode of F Troop. Right? They're going to all happen sort of the same way. Right. And those are the tropes that work for the show that are popular. So
and you'd miss them if they weren't there.
Oh, absolutely. You don't want a mass market sitcom to be innovative.
Right.
No, that's not what we're looking for. Mm-hmm. They're trying to appeal to a broad audience that'll tune in every week. So I began to think about dramatic structure, but also about patterns in our lives. Mm-hmm. And this was long before I knew that I was going to be working in the theater. Mm-hmm. But it's true that I always would rather be inside watching the Three Stooges than playing catch. Yeah. So
was going to mention. My aunt always said the same thing about Andy Griffith. She said everybody talks about how wholesome Andy
Yeah.
Griffith. She said he lies every episode. He lies to somebody every episode.
Well, and now I can step back and say, well, if you don't have any conflict, you don't have an episode.
Right.
Somebody's got to do something bad or something wrong or something's got to have a conflict or an obstacle.
Mm-hmm.
If it's just let's have dinner with Aunt B, that nobody wants to watch that episode. She's got to have burned the dinner or something.
Or her pickles will taste horrible.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. That was a good one. Yeah.
So for me, it was, I also I saw those same shows in reruns, but for me, probably the most influential was Little House on the Prairie.
Oh, yeah.
And
Never watched that.
It was very lesson-y.
Oh, sure.
So there was always,
Yeah.
and I said to a seminary professor one time that I learned as much about, that my belief system came as much from Little House on the Prairie as it did from Sunday school. And to which he said that makes a lot of sense.
That was a good professor. I was afraid the professor was going to say the opposite, so that's good.
Yeah, he said
I like that story. The best sitcom ever, All in the Family.
Yes.
For me, and I was like 14, perfect age to be exposed to an Archie Bunker, the opposite of my father, who was kind, sincere, gentle, accepting, loved everyone. I thought, who is this guy? And then I realized, oh, there's millions of this guy. This is like so many people in the world. So it was really great for me to make fun of bigotry, to expose bigotry by showing this idiot on television every week. I just loved it. And I loved Edith. I just loved that whole show.
And also, it's very much like watching a theater production. It's a play
Right,
that they just record for
That's right.
television,
That's right.
which I like too.
Yeah.
So as we're talking about theater, it's such a big part of your life. Is there some sort of intersection between your work in the theater and your faith?
So many that I don't even know how to narrow it down. I feel blessed to work in the theater because it's a human experience. It requires a group of people to come together and collaborate despite all of their insecurities, all of their reticence. We have to come together and trust each other and make something together that is greater than any one artist could make. It's messy to collaborate. It's frustrating to collaborate. But it's worth it to collaborate. And I think that's a strong parallel to the church.
Yeah, I was just about to say that sounds like a church.
Correct. It absolutely does. And so my dad always used to say, look, if you're waiting to join a church until you find one where there aren't any hypocrites, he said, then just go ahead and wait till heaven, because it's not going to happen here, because these are filled with human beings. So every church and every person in the church is flawed. And so if you're looking for perfection, move on. And I feel that way about creating art of any kind, but especially a collaborative art like theater. We drive each other crazy. We let each other down. We make mistakes. We offend, sometimes intentionally, but often unintentionally, while we're trying to work together. And yet, we have a common goal. And we have a common purpose. And when we're able to celebrate the differences that we all bring and forgive and ignore the deficiencies that we all bring, then we can make something incredible.
And again, a great lesson for church
That's
or
it.
family or coworkers or
Correct.
any group where you are in relationship with
That's it.
with other people.
Yeah, it's the human condition in microcosm, and we're called to be in the world and of the world and to lift the world, and I think the church does that, and I think the arts do that, and I certainly think theater can do that.
Is there a show in particular that you think represents, I don't maybe the ideal of how to live a Christ-like life, or that gives you or uplifts you?
Yeah, there's a lot of them. Really, the first one that jumps to mind is Our Town by Thornton Wilder, who I've already mentioned.
Right.
One of my very favorite writers. And Our Town, I think, is a play that says we need to, in a very secular way, there's not much about the church in Our Town. There's a wedding that takes place in a church, but there's a scene in the third act when the narrator, the stage manager, is at a cemetery, and all the folks who have been buried in the cemetery are represented by actors just sitting in chairs, and they're kind of they're speaking their frustrations about their lives. They're remembering their past lives, and the stage manager says, all the smartest people throughout generations have been telling us that there's something about us that's eternal. And that thing is human beings. There's something eternal about each and every human being. And again, it's a completely secular play, but I think there's a simple truth in that most people really respond to. And what the play says is that we're spiritual beings. While it celebrates everyday life and cooking breakfast and falling in love and having a malt at the drugstore, what it really reminds us of is that those are the trappings of this life, but we're more than that. There's something else. And as the stage manager says, and down deep, we all know that. We just don't take it out and look at it very often.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I love that play. Just love that play. There's a lot of others, but that one, especially for a play that doesn't purport to be sacred, it's very sacred.
Well, thank you. I could sit here and talk to you all day.
Me too.
But I really appreciate your time, and this has been wonderful.
Pleasure.
And hope that you have enjoyed this as much as I have. I bet you did. If you would like to share your faith story, I would love to have you on the red couch. Formation
It's
at
very comfy.
Yeah. Formation at uccftw.com. Take care. Have a great week.
How many shows can we name back and forth?
Okay. Is there a time period?
50s, 60s, maybe 70s.
Okay.
Is that enough?
Yeah.
Nothing contemporary because I don't know anymore.
Friends.
I believe that's 80s. Have we started?
We've started, yeah.
The Dick Van Dyke Show.
Mary Tyler Moore.
I Dream of Jeannie.
Bewitched.
December Bride. Do you know that one?
Our Miss Brooks.
You'll Never Get Rich. I'm older than you.
One Day at a Time.
F Troop.
Different Strokes.
The Jeffersons.
The Lucy Show.
The Beverly Hillbillies.
Oh, here's Lucy.
Now you're cheating.
Now I'm cheating.
Green Acres.
Petticoat Junction.
Danny Thomas Show, originally known as Make Room for Daddy.
Mayberry RFD.
You're a spin-off guy.